Welcome everyone to this wonderful event, this last lecture of Dr. John McBratney, who's in his 32nd year of professing English at John Carroll. We've been so lucky to have him. My name is Phil Metris. I'm very just grateful to have been John's colleague and to be able to shepherd this into being. And I have some people to thank. First, I wanted to thank Eric Eichhoff of the advancement team, who's been helpful with helping set up the registration page and also just connecting us to the alumni. Secondly, thank Debbie Rosenthal, our dear colleague, who's been who's organized some gifts to John, and as well as Mary Claire Maroney, who is the chair of our department, who has been helpful in helping to push out the message to our various constituents. So one of the reasons why I invited David and now John, and I'm sure the rest of our colleagues, to do one of these last lectures is purely out of envy and curiosity, which is to say that I've never had the opportunity to be taught by John, and I'm just really wanted to be able to sit in his classroom and to listen to him as a student. So welcome everyone from wherever you are. Please feel free to use the chat to share an anecdote about Dr. McBratney that you would like, something that he said or something that was meaningful to you. We will save the chat as we go. This is being recorded. And I have just one request for you. If you are an English major alum of John Carroll and you would like to be part of our John Carroll network of major alums, and you would like to be a mentor perhaps, or your place of work would offer internships, please do let us know. And you can throw that in the chat as well. And we'll just harvest it all and sort of welcome you home and sort of connect you more closely with our students as they're moving through their own process of discernment and finding their way in the world. And that would just be very, very helpful to us as a department. This is something that's been a long time coming. You all are doing such great work and interesting work and diverse work in the world. And this is a way for us to see you and to connect with you and where you are. So I just wanted to mention one or two things, and please leave your contact information there as well. So I saw Eric said he'd gladly mentor, just an email would be wonderful. So I just wanted to name a few things about John before I turn it over to Dave Lucas, who's going to provide a student perspective. Dave Lucas is an esteemed alum from 2002. I just wanted to mention that John is the sort of fellow who is the office maker of the coffee. And as the office maker of the coffee, that means that other people benefit from his largesse. He is also frequently the coffee cleaner. And that means that he's someone who cares for the environment. This is a small little thing, but just one of those things one notices as we bump up against each other as colleagues in the world, that he's someone who is generous and someone who is meticulous and someone who cares for others. And I know that that's actually the way he is in the classroom. He has a certain meticulousness to him. And more than that, he has a kind of integrity about him. There's something really interesting about the fact that he was attracted to the Victorians, given their sense of ethics and moral compass. The last thing I would just say about John before I turn it over to a much more personal and beautiful testimony to John's influence is his passion for the humanities. And that's something that in our society at present is a bit under attack, let's say, but John speaks to and walks the walk of why the humanities are important. And I'm really grateful to have been able to work with him. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dave Lucas to introduce John.
Thanks, Phil, very much. And good evening, all. And thank you for signing in from wherever you are to celebrate the career of Dr. John McBratney. As Phil said, my name is Dave Lucas. I'm a 2002 graduate of John Carroll University. And I have the honor of speaking to you tonight about my mentor and friend, knowing, of course, that so many of you listening could tell so many similar stories of your mentor and friend. I trust that in what I am about to say, you will hear echoes of your own experience. I should also mention that in what I am about to say, there is at least one swear word that I hope to sneak past the censors, so apologies for that in advance. I've known John McBratney for more than half my life, and I may well owe more than half my life to knowing him. Yes, I am a poet, but for once, that's not hyperbole. John would have been one of the most influential teachers and mentors in my college career, even if his courses had not intersected with other transformative moments in my life, moments his tutelage and friendship made possible. I learned as much from the offhand conversation in the hallway as I did from his notes on my papers, as some of you remember, stapled on those dot matrix printed pages, perforated margins and all. I met my first love in John's Brit Lit class, the Old English 212, in the spring of 1999. And for the next few years, John and anyone else who would listen had to suffer through all the awful poems I wrote about it. John was saying something profound about the egotistical sublime and negative capability, but I'm pretty sure every I in those terms and the notes I was taking was dotted with a heart that semester. In fact, I think I fell into and out of love a few times in John's classes, with apologies to all involved, especially the otherwise innocent Gerard Manley Hopkins and Christina Rossetti. In Victorian literature in the spring of 2002, I met the woman who would become my wife. The priest who married us was a young seminarian in the same class. And John and his wife, Betsy, were there at our wedding in 2010. John having long since forgiven me, I hope, for never, ever finishing the mill on the floss. Sorry, John. Falling in love, with words I mean, especially as John illuminated them, also helped to illuminate all the chaos a young person of 18 or 21 feels within them. Meanwhile, John was publishing scholarly work that would distinguish him in his discipline and his department, including in 2002, this book, Imperial Subjects, Imperial Space. That's a first edition there and it's signed. So anyone who wants to make an offer, let me know in the chat. In 2002, this book, which at least one fellow Victorianist has called, quote, quite simply the best critical book on Rudyard Kipling, was published. An omnivorous cosmopolitan intellect, John's lectures might as easily include a few lines of German poetry or a few from J-Lo's Jenny from the Block. In our time as his students, our own running line was, McBratney is such a good guy, he makes Gandhi look like an asshole. I stand by that to this day, though I fear it rather understates the case. When John got word that his manuscript had been accepted at the Ohio State University Press, he waited until he got home to phone his parents with the good news. Why? Because he didn't want the university to have to pay the long distance charge. John and I have long since become friends, though it took me a long time to stop saying Dr. McBratney and to start saying John. Not because of any airs or graces on his part, but because of the calm, magisterial authority of his presence, first in the classroom and office hours, then in meetings over lunches or drinks. So over time, I learned of the athlete John, who played for the Dartmouth squash team, the bohemian John, who hitchhiked across the country, the adventurer John, serving in the Peace Corps in Thailand, and the family man John, husband and father. I learned a great deal from Dr. McBratney. I may have learned even more from John. I have been bothering him these many years to write his memoirs, and now, John, you have no excuse. We call them the humanities because they are the study of those things that humans make and do, literature, art, history, etc. To study what humans make is supposed to make us more human, more humane. But spend enough time around English departments and you'll find out that isn't always the case. I've been around several English departments in my time, but John remains my model for what humanists should be. A brilliant lecturer who is even a better listener, a man of well-considered opinions who seems to welcome the chance to change his mind, a keen scholar and critic who has never lost the enthusiasm for what brought him to the work in the first place. These humanistic values, I would even go so far as to call them Jesuit values, are all the more precious at this hour when they seem beset on all sides. In the cynical farce that passes for our politics, in the defamation of public health officials, in threats to the academic freedom of scholars and teachers across the country. So it is all the more urgent, not only that we hear what John has to say tonight, but that we strive to follow his example. John is not a Jesuit, but a Victorianist. Nevertheless, his sense of duty and sacrifice is less Middlemarch than Sermon on the Mount. Anyone who knows John knows what he has given to his discipline and his institution, to his students and colleagues, to his family and friends. Gandhi never had a chance. This may be his last lecture, but I have no doubt that we will continue to learn from John McBratney. Nevertheless, I hope this evening is an opportunity to toast all that he has meant for all of us who know him. May we all have such teachers who become our dear friends. May we all have such friends who teach us so dearly much. Friends, please join me in welcoming Professor John McBratney.
Thank you for both those introductions, Phil. Thank you for, I will continue to make coffee and clean up the coffee area as long as I, teach at John Carroll. I'm going to be retiring, but I will come back occasionally to teach courses. So I will fulfill that duty as a good Victorian should. And thank you, David. Oh, hey, Amy, how are you? And David, I did not know that about the mill and the floss. Maybe you told me, but I didn't. I don't think I knew that you did not finish that.
Thank you for forgetting.
I think I'm going to have to go back and change your grade. I'm duty bound in that way too. I consider you a very good friend, but I've got to treat everyone equally. All right. Well, I hope that my presentation can be as fine as the introductions that I just heard. Instead of delivering a lecture, I'd like to offer a series of vignettes, snapshots of my life, which tell the story of my developing love for language and literature. This so-called last lecture will serve not only as a narrative about my own experience, but also a tribute to all those persons, teachers and family members who have nourished my passion for words. I'll conclude with a rallying cry to my colleagues in the humanities. I'll read to you for about 40 to 45 minutes. I hope that I don't put you to sleep. I trust that these narratives will be gripping enough so that you'll be on the edge of your chairs. In my first grade class at Peyton-Aram Elementary School in South Dartmouth, Massachusetts, I sit at my wooden desk with its empty inkwell and its scratches left by a score of students before me. Our student, Mrs. Kostakis, writes on the blackboard in lowercase cursive a large letter A. We have been practicing writing the alphabet using the Palmer method, so we all recognize the letter, but we haven't yet been taught how to read. Mind you, this is the era before our present one, in which some parents have their children reading, say, Japanese, before the age of 6. Mrs. Kostakis points to the board. This is the letter A, but it's also the word as in a cat. I feel a tiny explosion in my chest and think, this is how they do it. This is reading. This is what my parents do when they read Winnie the Pooh to my sisters and me. Soon I'm sitting in my small circle with my classmates, reading about the adventures of Dick and Jane and their dog Spot. This is the beginning. Mrs. Kostakis has launched us upon the 7 C's of reading. I am now in 2nd grade, and my reading and speaking vocabulary has expanded. Already a bit of a peacock, I love big words. I also love exotic words, not just their sound, but also their look. I'm entranced by the word Czechoslovakia. I first see it on our world map, which my father, a geography and history buff, has mounted on the bedroom wall and loves to show us. There has been a war in the Suez Canal between Great Britain and Egypt, he explains. I'm awed. But as my eyes drift northward from Egypt, I see something even more awe-inspiring. The sliver of a country with the astounding name beginning with CZ. What word could possibly begin with such a wonderful combination of letters and close with an unusual KIA? Afterwards, as I walk to and from home and Peyton school, I spell the word Czechoslovakia under my breath as fast as I can. CZECHOSLOVAKIA. I do this obsessively, muttering the name as if it were a spell that would open up other countries of thrilling shape and sound. In his poem, The Circus Animal's Desertion, William Butler Yeats reveals his preference throughout much of his poetic career for art over life, the artistic representation of things over the things themselves. He writes, "Players and painted stage took all my love, and not those things they were emblems of." As a child, I have an inkling of what he means. For my 12th birthday, my parents give me a kit called The Visible Man. Once you fit together and glue the many pieces of the kit together, you have a model of a man whose major bones and muscles are visible. Because I've shown an interest in my father's medical career from an early age, my parents want to encourage me. In what should have been a portent of the future, however, I'm interested not in building the man, but in memorizing the accompanying manual with its diagrams of bones and muscles, each identified by its Latin name: ulna, radius, tibia, fibula, latissimus dorsi, sternocleidomastoid, and serratus anterior. I never construct the visible man, but I come away with a new corpus of esoteric words. My course is set. What really intrigues me are not the things themselves, but the words that emblematize them. I'll pursue the dream of becoming a doctor for the next 10 years, never heeding the lesson of the visible man until my junior year in college, when I switched my major from biology to English. As a boy, I'm swept up by the romance of science, especially nuclear physics and cellular biology. But at the same time, I'm reading fiction hungrily. By the 8th grade, I'm feeling the limitations of juvenile detective fiction, The Hardy Boys, and adolescent historical fiction, Joseph Altsheler. And having heard about the great books, I want to challenge myself. I embark on Fyodor Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, and in a few pages, I'm mesmerized. Harold Bloom argues that what defines great literature is its fundamental strangeness, its ability to conjure up imaginative worlds that are off kilter, awkwardly juxtaposed to any we've experienced before. Dostoevsky's world is certainly strange. The setting, 19th century St. Petersburg, is foreign, and the whole premise of the novel is bizarre. Driven by dire poverty and a cold nihilism, the protagonist, Raskolnikov, kills an old woman with an axe and then spends the rest of the novel tortured by guilt and playing a cat and mouse game with a police detective before confessing his crime and going to prison in Siberia, where he's finally redeemed by the love of a good-hearted prostitute. Yet while the novel is strange, it is also oddly, unexpectedly familiar. As guilt gnaws the protagonist, I recall times that I've been racked by guilt. I'm discovering what all great literature teaches, that the unfamiliar lies within the familiar, that the alien other resides within the everyday self. When I finish Crime and Punishment, I'm hooked on the great books. By the time I'm a sophomore in high school, I've taken 2 years of French, but in 10th grade, feeling emboldened, I decide to try my hand at a new language, Latin, which means that I'll be taking Miss O'Donnell, a teacher who inspires fear. By the time I take her class, she's been teaching at Dartmouth High School for many years. She had begun her career as a young woman, but several years into her time at the high school, she started to stumble for no apparent reason. After tumbling down a flight of stairs, she decided to see a doctor who diagnosed her with muscular dystrophy. When I meet her in Latin class, She moves about in a wheelchair. Although she is a devout Catholic, intent on curbing her stubborn will, she seems to me to be in quiet but persistent rebellion against her condition. I feel that stiff resistance in her precise diction, a fierce clarity of enunciation that exceeds any I've heard before. It occurs to me that she is trying to stave off, for as long as she can, the moment at which her illness will begin to rob her of her ability to speak. She maintains a strict, even finicky discipline. She subtracts points from our quiz scores if we forget to put periods after our numbers. But she leavens that rigor with a passion for Latin that we all feel. From her, I learned to grasp a small corner of that vast puzzle that is Latin grammar and syntax, the intricate linguistic structure that, in its highly inflected state, allows for great flexibility in the ordering of its parts. The way that these parts fit snugly together is almost as exciting as the moment at which Caesar pronounces alia iacta est and decides to cross the Rubicon. One day, Miss O'Donnell tells us that she has a treat for us, a taste of one of the languages descended from Latin. She opens Dante's Divine Comedy and reads a passage in the original Italian. I have never heard a more beautiful language. Years later, I pass what used to be her house and am tempted to see if she still lives there, but I'm too shy, too afraid that I might be intruding or simply mistaken that she's even alive. In my junior year in high school, in a stroke of good fortune, I have two teachers, the French teacher, Madame Bly, and the English teacher, Mr. Bennett, who shaped my responses to language in ways that have stuck with me even today. Madame Bly is my teacher in French 3. In the years I've studied French, I've never really felt that the language lived in people's mouths as they went about their daily affairs, buying bread at the bakery or telling their puppy to stop jumping up on passers-by or kissing their mother before going to sleep. Madame Bly brings French to life. She's young, pretty, vivacious, and fond of short skirts, and likes to perch on the edge of her desk. She has joie de vivre. She pampers her conversation in French with exclamations, zut alors, formidable, and magnifique. When my friends and I meet in the hallway at school, we sometimes intersperse our talk as a joke with these phrases, as if we were flaneurs strolling down the Champs-Élysées. She also has a refreshing sense of humor. At times, she makes fun of herself, even of her French when she was younger. She tells us the story of her time as a high school exchange student in France. She's eating dinner with her host family, and when she has finished her dessert, she declares, "Je suis plein," which makes perfect sense to her. I am full, plein meaning full. But as she looks around the table, every member of her host family has stopped eating and is staring at her. Suddenly, they burst out laughing. She has just announced that she is pregnant, which they now realize isn't true. She has just run afoul of a French idiom. That Madame Bly tells the story is, well, magnifique. On the first day of class, Mr. Bennett, our junior year English teacher, walks briskly into the room. He's thin, sharp-shouldered beneath his jacket and deep voiced. When he smiles, he has a quick, toothy grin. His enthusiasm ripples under his skin. Within 5 minutes, my classmates and I feel a rapport with him. Over the course of the semester, he teaches us everything from diagramming sentences to reading Shakespeare and makes the gamut instructive and entertaining. From him, I learned to cherish the architecture of sentences. Some young men in my class like to tinker with the engines of their first cars. I like to tinker with sentences, getting under the hood of a compound or a cumulative sentence, getting greasy with its parts. From him, for the first time, I learned to relish Shakespeare. In our junior year, The Dark Majesty of Macbeth, a play that remains one of my favorite dramas. But the high point of the semester point at which Mr. Bennett's voice swells to its most resonant, comes when he introduces us to E.E. Cummings. He reveres the American modernist, but above all, he loves Edward Estlin Cummings. We're swept up by his fervor. What high school student wouldn't love a poet who refuses to capitalize his name and who plays with a boyish brashness with conventional poetic form and diction? Anybody lives in a pretty how town with up so floating many bells down. Spring, summer, autumn, winter, he sang his didn't, he danced his did. Years later, my enthusiasm for Cummings cools, but certain phrases stay with me, worn smooth and shiny by repetition in my mind. All in green went my love riding, or the last leaf whirling in the final brain of air. In Mr. Bennett's classroom, I'm roused to write my first poetry, at least the first poetry I care about. An avid tennis player, I describe hitting a forehand in the sweet spot of my racket. To me, I write, it's like biting into a ripe peach and feeling all the juice ooze into my mouth. Years later, when I return to my hometown, I see him on New Year's Eve, helping at the alcohol-free festival that the nearby city of New Bedford holds every year. He never seems to age. When I tell him that I'm an English teacher too, largely because of him, he's quietly pleased. He may be the finest teacher I've ever had. At Dartmouth College in the 1970s, I have three teachers who inspire me to pursue English as my major. The department Shakespearean, Professor Sacchio, the medievalist, Professor Gaylord, and the British modernist, Professor Bean. Mr. Sacchio is my teacher in two courses, British Literature 1 and Introduction to Shakespeare. He's a short man with deft, quick gestures who strikes me as a born actor, someone who has passed up the big stage to choose the smaller stage of the lecture hall. He blends lecture and performance seamlessly. He quotes an older female friend of his who describes seeing King Lear as the equivalent of drinking black poison. When studying Macbeth, he introduces the concept not of the tragic flaw, but of the tragic strength, the strength that turns into its opposite and brings about the hero's fall. Macbeth has the power to be a truly good and great leader of his Scottish subjects, but in aiming too high, he finds that power turned fatally against him, engendering his doom. The concept of the tragic strength seems so simple, but it makes clear, profound moral and psychological sense. As a supplement to the course, Mr. Sacchio invites us to listen to BBC recordings of Shakespeare's plays in the library. This is just before the age of video recordings. These are all audio recordings. I spend hours under the library headphones, so many that after each session, I find myself thinking in iambic pentameter. Late in the semester, I'm listening to the last set of plays in the course in preparation for the final exam, when the librarian taps me on the shoulder. Mr. Sacchio, the librarian whispers, would like you to know that the final exam is in progress. He'd be happy to give you extra time to finish the test. A half hour late, I race to the lecture hall to take the exam. The last student to hand in my textbooklet, I thank Mr. Sacchio profusely. He smiles. He is not the first person to overlook my absent-mindedness, but he is certainly the most generous. Mr. Gaylord, as my instructor in three courses, Chaucer, Chivalric Romance, and Introduction to Film, is clearly the teacher I seek out most. A tall, robust, big-boned man, he spreads an air of benevolence and good cheer in the classroom. Is he the son of a preacher? He is the first professor I can remember who conveys to me the importance of scholarship in literary studies, the vast conversation among scholars and critics carried on over generations, to which any claimant to a new contribution needs to listen closely. Like all my gifted teachers, he enlarges my literary, cultural, and historical imagination. In the Chaucer class, which he devotes to a study of the Canterbury Tales, he requires that we learn Middle English, not as some dry exercise, but as the ticket of entry into another world. For one assignment, we are asked to record a recitation of a passage from the prologue. I choose the Portrait of the Friar. A friar there was, a wanton and a merrier, a limitor, a full solemnaman. I'm delighted by the sing-song of the language and the ease with which the diction moves between the sacred and the profane. In the chivalric romance course, Mr. Gaylord clearly prefers the old romances of Chrétien de Troyes and Wolfram von Eschenbach, I should be able to pronounce that better than that, Wolfram von Eschenbach, to their 20th century adaptations like E.B. White's The Once and Future King. Like Max Weber, he sees our modern age as an iron cage of rationality, an epic of disenchantment bereft of magical thought. Ironically, he also seems to believe that the modern technology of film may help us to escape our cage and reclaim the magical in a fresh form. In our film course, in which we watch movies from Robert Wien's The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari to Joseph Losey's The Go-Between, I learn a vocabulary about cinema, close-up, arc shot, montage, I'd never known before. With this new language, I bring a new eye to the movies I watch. In 2017, I'm grieved to read that Professor Gaylord has died. Finally, there is the inestimable Mr. Bean, small, dapper, and old world European, proudly incongruous in the hills of rural New Hampshire. He is not only a fine scholar, but also one of the leading translators of the Greek novelist Nikos Kazantzakis, best known for his novel Zorba the Greek. He has high expectations for his students, and if they fail to meet them, he's visibly disappointed, frowning deeply. He's the toughest grader I've faced in my major. He thinks nothing of giving me B's when he feels my work falls short of his standard of excellence. Yet the challenge he throws down spurs me on. I'm determined to wring a few words of praise from him. I take two of his courses, European Modernism and Joyce's Finnegan's Wake. The first, a survey of modernism that crisscrosses the European continent, packs the heaviest reading load of any course I will take at the undergraduate or graduate level. In one quarter, we read James Joyce's Ulysses, Marcel Proust's Swan's Way, Thomas Mann's The Magic Mountain, E.M. Forster's The Passage to India, Joseph Conrad's The Heart of Darkness, Virginia Woolf's To the Lighthouse, and Kazantzaki's The Last Temptation of Christ. I can't keep up with the flood of books, but at least I keep my head above water. The pace, the sweep, the depth of analysis, the grand overview, it's all breathtaking. The Finnegan's Wake course is more manageable. It's a small seminar, which meets at night and at which we sip wine. After our second glass, our conversation softens into vague dream, perfectly in keeping with a novel written in the language of sleep. For my final project, I choose the option of writing a pastiche of the wake, an interpolated scene that imitates the puns and neologisms of the original. It's great fun to write, and although I get another B+ in the course, Professor Bean awards me a certificate of high commendation for my pastiche. Apparently, he's still teaching as an emeritus professor. He's a monument to dedication to the craft of teaching and the art of translation. Shift gears a little here. As long as I can remember, my family has been open to the foreign. A Portuguese doctor comes to dinner in our home and teaches the children tricks with a soccer ball. A Nigerian doctor and his family, now residing in the US, also come to dinner. An English medical student shadows my father on rounds. We also host two exchange students, one from Tasmania, the other from Finland. My father goes abroad on the ship Hope to Ecuador, Sri Lanka, and Brazil, and independently to Vietnam and Haiti. The oldest of my sisters spends a college term abroad in England. As a high school student, my youngest sister, whom some of you met, spends a summer in Lebanon, and later as a nurse works briefly at a clinic in Haiti. So it seems only natural that I would devote 3.5 years of my life to teaching English to college students as a Peace Corps volunteer in Thailand. As part of our training, my fellow volunteers and I learned Thai 6 hours a day during the week and 3 hours a day on weekends. Our brains ache after every session, but we learn fast. When sent to the hinterlands after training, we are all able to survive. Thai is a tonal language, which means that when you change the pitch of a word, you alter its meaning. Thai has 5 tones: mid, high, low, rising, and falling. As an illustration, consider this example. My. That is my, mid, my, low, my, falling, my, rising, my, high, which means new wood doesn't burn, does it? After a year in country, I'm speaking without translating in my mind. After 3.5 years, I'm proficient. I'm astounded at how much fun speaking a foreign language in country is. My time in the Peace Corps also yields another gift. As a volunteer, I have the time to read for long stretches. After rushing through E.M. Forster's A Passage to India in college, I returned to the novel in Thailand, and having spent 3 years learning to find my way in an Asian society, I understand the novel's intercultural nuances in a way that I never had at Dartmouth. One day, I pick up the book, which I had left out in the open in the home I share with a Canadian volunteer and a Thai teacher, and find a note scribbled on the page where I've left my bookmark. Next to the name Aziz, one of the characters in the novel, in the text, I see in pencil the Muslim name rendered in Arabic. Who could have written it? I remember then that we have a guest, a fellow Muslim of my Muslim Thai housemate. I presume he has left this gloss. The Arabic word glows for a moment like a sign. In that instant, I warn with a new intensity to the idea of going to graduate school in English and writing about Anglophone novels set in British Imperial India. I don't know it then, but the course of my professional future is set. In the fall of 1979, in my first semester in the doctoral program in English at the University of California, Berkeley, I'm sitting in Professor Nestrick's Renaissance class. It's a week into the class, and as I turn to look at the young woman to my right who is speaking, and whom I've never really looked at before, I'm stunned by her beauty in profile. Brigitte Brunhart, who will later become my first wife, is from Salt Lake City, Utah. Her mother is from Cologne, Germany, her father from Balzas, Liechtenstein. She's a doctoral student in comparative literature in a department that is notorious for its rigorous linguistic demands, a program in which one must compare at least 3 languages to complete its requirements. Brigitte is fluent in her native language, German, and the language of her adopted homeland, English. Her French doesn't lag far behind. She's intensely interested in Old English, really an old form of German. And as an actor and a ham, she loves to declaim for me the opening of Cadman's hymn. Since I'm studying German as one of the 3 languages in which I have to demonstrate proficiency, I venture a few phrases in German in our conversation from time to time, mainly to elicit her laughter. I succeed. When I'm with her family, I love listening to their Germlish, as they call it, as they code switch from German to English and back. At least my listening comprehension, if not my listening skills, are slowly improving. For students who are passionate about literature and have the stamina to sustain that passion in a course of study that can take up to 10 years, a Ph.D. in literature offers them an oasis of reading. Such students are delighted to wake up in the morning, attend a class or 2, and then, monk-like, read for much of the rest of the day and into the night. Yet graduate school is as much about writing as it is about reading. You quickly realize that unless you can write well in a manner that's clear, precise, learned, sophisticated, and engaging, you have no future in the profession. I attend graduate school in the 1980s at a time of transition in literary studies, when theory with a capital T is taking academia by storm. At the time that I'm attending, reader response theory is giving way to deconstruction, which in turn is under challenge from post-colonial studies, women's studies, queer studies, and the new historicism. Indeed, Berkeley is in many ways the birthplace of new historicism. Stephen Greenblatt, Catherine Gallagher, Thomas Metcalfe, and others, the founders of the school, are all there. It's an intellectually heady time to be in graduate school, but as a student who is at once eager to learn about these new trends and attached to a model of clear writing that some would consider old-fashioned, I'm torn. How do I combine the abstruse language of theory with the lucidity of a traditional plain style? How do I blend Edward Said's Foucauldian rhetoric, which I admire, with the clarity, concision, and grace of those teachers at Berkeley to whose style I'm instinctively drawn? The sharp wit of the Americanist Frederick Cruz and the modest elegance of my dear mentor, dissertation director, and later friend, the late British modernist Alex Swerdling. This tension will be the anvil in which I beat out the iron of my writing for better or for worse for the rest of my life. I'm getting close, so bear with me. In my 32 years of teaching at John Carroll, I'm now poised to retire. At this point, I'd love to talk about my wonderful colleagues and students. However, I resist doing so, not because they have failed to mold my taste and understanding. They have done so profoundly, but because I need to thank too many people and I have too little time left to do that. Suffice it to say, they have been the most intelligent, curious, warm, funny, imaginative, stimulating, and kind community that I could have ever wished for. In the time remaining, let me instead say a few brief words about my family members who from the beginning have formed, and in the years beyond my career at John Carroll will continue to shape my responses to language and literature. Though some of these family members are no longer living, I'll keep to the present tense, and in that way, recall them to life for a space. My late father, a surgeon, learns rudimentary Portuguese to communicate better with his poor Portuguese-speaking patients. As an extension of that effort, he makes a valiant attempt to read the entirety of Tolstoy's War and Peace in Portuguese. We never know whether he actually finishes the novel, but we admire the effort. I get my stubborn doggedness from him. With her instinct for correct form, my mother lays the foundation of my grammar for life. Even in her 90s, she will sometimes catch me in some grammatical infelicity. In her 70s, she reads the entire corpus of Edith Wharton, a writer she in her late years admires above all others. In my childhood and youth, I have the reputation for being a great reader. But my secret sense is that my oldest sister, Susan, reads more voraciously than I do. Today, she reads contemporary fiction with a discriminating eye. If I want to get tips on the best fiction that people are reading now, I consult her. In her child, my middle sister, Annie, and a neighborhood friend invent a language all their own, which they slip into at times as adults. Recently, in her second career, after her retirement from nursing, she has become an interior designer. As an artist, she is a plain Yankee with a core of fire. Is there a family resemblance in the style of her designs and the measures of my poetry? Perhaps so. My youngest sister, Peggy, knows 5 languages: French, Portuguese, Spanish, Italian, and Haitian Creole with some degree of proficiency. She has a peerless ear. When we get together, we trade tidbits of what has struck us in our continuing study of languages. She inspires me to keep plodding in my daily online lessons in German, Spanish, and Italian. My brother Jim puns obsessively. Although I remind him that the 18th century writer Samuel Johnson considered puns the lowest form of wit, he blithely ignores the good doctor's judgment. Although I've never admitted this, I admire his verbal ingenuity. Shortly after their arrival in the United States, our adopted children, Indra and Kumar, astound me when I surprise them playing alone together in their playroom. After only 2 weeks in country, they have decided to abandon their native Nepali and speak only rudimentary English. As adults, they disarm me with their scathing, sardonic wit, often directed at their father. In the last years of her life, my first wife, Brigitte, begins to lose, due to seizures, the very literary and linguistic gifts that had drawn us together in graduate school. Sic transit gloria mundi. After her death, I continue to study German to honor her memory. My dear wife, Betsy, knows computer languages I'll never know: Java, SQL, Linux, and others. Yet she loves human languages too, especially in the form of contemporary fiction. She has just finished Anne Patchett's Bel Canto. I do not hold it against her that despite several attempts, she has never been able to finish Hawthorne's Scarlet Letter. They like to tease each other. Let me end with a pep talk for my colleagues in English, drawing upon some of the insights that a life with language and literature have left me. Much has been made recently of the decline of the humanities throughout higher education and our society. There's no simple way to reverse this decline, but I think there's reason to hope. With waning belief in the myth of American exceptionalism, a myth that's long needed exploding, perhaps we Americans will grow humbler and begin to engage in some much needed soul searching. With that self-examination, perhaps we'll return to our intellectual, moral, and spiritual roots in the humanities. Questions of ultimate value cannot be settled with numbers, despite all the wonderful things they can tell us about ourselves. Such questions can be adjudicated in some ultimate sense only with words. Words are what we need to hang on to. In an episode from the Netflix series The Crown, Prince Philip suffers a midlife crisis of faith in which he first mocks and then embraces a community of middle-aged Anglican priests facing their own loss of faith in their sunset years. In that episode, I found a lesson, not about religious faith, that's too fraught a subject for me, but about faith in my vocation as a teacher. We need to renew our faith in words, from the simplest units of language to the most complex formal structures in literature. And we need to pursue that faith with passion, an ardor for everything verbal, from the mere sounds of words to the grand architectonics of Shakespeare's plays. About 15 years ago, a professor of English wrote an essay in which he confessed that he had grown tired of playing the cool professor for his students, viewing the field of literature from a lofty height, paring his fingernails, as it were. He vowed that he would recover the passion for literature that had inspired him as an instructor long ago and would teach again from the heart. So let's renew our faith and rekindle our passion and listen to our students who have come to us looking for our heartfelt commitment to our endeavor and to fuel that commitment with their own enthusiasm and keen insight. We may ultimately fail, but at least we won't have gone gentle into that good night of obsolescence. We will have gone down swinging, non-violently, of course, swinging for what we love. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
I would love to create a space for people to ask you some questions, but just
Sure.
as people are sort of considering their questions, I wanted to share with you some pictures that might remind you of some things.
I was born with a full head of hair.
You're
Just
doing
like
pretty well there, John.
my grandniece who was just born. She has a full head of hair too. She's about as light as I was too at birth, 6 pounds, 2 ounces. Ronit is the name, R-O-N-I-T.
Hmm.
Yeah, but Yeah, I used to have really bad teeth, and one of Brian McCaskill's children came over and took a look at this and said, "Yeah, I can see that's you, down to the bad teeth."
Such a happy picture. I just absolutely
Yeah,
love
yeah.
It is.
Oh wow! Look at all
So
that blonde hair.
Tell us about your family there. Who's in this one?
Okay. Well, my dad and mom are in the back, and I'm the oldest in the family. There I am on the right, obviously. This is Susan, the great reader. Yeah, on the left. This is Annie, just sort of sitting between my father and my sister Susan. She is the interior decorator. There's Jim, the punster. And there's my sister Peggy between Jim and me. She's the linguist. And then you sort of recognize the guy on the right there with a lot more hair and and a much more youthful look. Wow, I can't believe you found that. Oh, did Maria? Well,
there's more. There's more.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Hold your horses. Betsy has been here. Let's see. What do we have here?
Oh my God!
Whoa, look at that stud.
Now, that's my high school graduation picture, 1973. Looking lost. But I am wearing a tie.
You look like you could fit right in with the Highlanders of Scotland.
Well, I guess I'm not a McBratney for nothing.
So hold on 1 second. Tell us
Oh
about
yes.
this one.
Well, I don't know if you can see that I have no chips. This was the most likely to succeed, and that's Janet Merrill, who used to sew all her clothes. She was an amazingly self-reliant. And when we were all asked, well, what's the most important thing in life? She said self-respect. But she and I were the most likely to succeed, and we were winning nothing in this poker. Yeah, you can see all the chips there. Oh yes, yeah, and these are the most, we are the most studious. We're devouring our books.
Wonderful.
And that's Sue Siegel, yeah. Oh, and there's Brigitte. Looking larger, I mean, just looking so alive there. Yeah.
I wanted to include her.
Yeah, thank you, Betsy.
Thank you so much again, Betsy, for sharing these wonderful pictures.
Oh, yes.
You're welcome.
And I think that's probably Kumar's drawing.
It's yours, John.
Okay. Should have recognized my style. It's my dad mowing the lawn, dragging Blackie, our dog, along, our mongrel.
All right, I think we have one more. Let me see if I can find it here. Oh yeah, there it is.
Oh yeah, all right. Yeah, that's my backhand.
Look at that nice backhand, John.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I look good, but I didn't necessarily win a lot of games.
I wanted to share those pictures just so people could get a sense of the pictures behind the stories that you told as you so often we see each other as grown-ups, but you know, inside each of us is of course all of these past selves, and you so eloquently sort of described all the ways in which teachers had impacted you. And I see that as a classic John move. Instead of really talking about yourself, you talked about how these teachers played a role in your life. So thank you so much. So if anybody would like to ask John a question about anything or just say hello, the floor is officially open. Again, I would just want to say one more time, if you'd like to be in closer touch with us, the English department, please do let us know, either in the chat or by email. So just appreciate that. So does anybody want to, there's been some wonderful stuff in the chat, which I'm not going to read to you, but yeah.
Can we just come off mute, Dr. Mattress?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay. Hi, Dr. McBratney.
Hi, how are you?
Kristen Van Atta from
Yes, I remember you. You were
okay.
in the romantics class and you went off to Kent State. Yeah.
Yes. Oh my gosh, your memory is incredible. I was just going to ask you if you have any funny stories from teaching freshman writing, which I'm sure you had to do once or twice.
Oh, I did. I had to do a lot of it when I first arrived. In fact, you know, I taught 3 courses a semester, and for my first couple of semesters, I had to teach 2 sections of first year writing. Dave LaGuardia was testing me. He was saying, you know, is this guy going to be able to hang in there? And so he gave me a very heavy grading load, but I survived. I'm trying to think. I'm trying, you know, I don't know if this is a funny story, and maybe it says too much about me, but some of you may remember Nancy Weingart, who was a graduate assistant. Was she a graduate assistant? I think she was just an adjunct faculty member for years, teaching first year writing. I mean, the nicest woman. And when I arrived, she gave me all this Brown's paraphernalia, like a Brown's pencil and a Brown's, a Tootsie Roll for some reason. I guess because it's brown and has an orange wrapper. And some other Cleveland Browns paraphernalia. Anyway, she was just starting, I think, as an adjunct professor. And I think it was the system then for an adjunct professor who was new to work as a protege under a more experienced teacher. And I wasn't really experienced, but I had a little bit more, I had more courses under my belt than she did. And we were teaching, I don't know if you remember that art history lecture room that was way up in the attic. You had to go up rickety stairs to get there. It was just the oddest room or set of rooms. There were 2 rooms up there. Anyway, I think the roof leaked occasionally, and there would sometimes be a puddle right in front of the teacher's desk. And I came into the classroom and saw the puddle and avoided it as I was teaching. But it happened to be a class in which I had asked Nancy to teach some material just to, you know, get her feet wet, so to speak. She came up to the lectern and she slipped in this puddle and fell right on her rear end. And she was, you know, this is her debut, and she comes a cropper. And I felt so bad for her, and I just said, you know what? I saw that puddle and I really should have said something about it. And she thanked me years later, and you know, that I covered, you know, her terrible fall in a way that I hope made it a little bit easier for her to get up and teach her first class. It was not really a funny story, but you know, it's she didn't break any bones. That was the good news. Yeah. Any other questions?
I have one, John. Can you hear me?
Oh, Jody Bilger. Hello.
Jody Bilger. I don't know if you remember me. I'm in the English department.
Yeah. You cut your hair.
My office
as if you put on a little bit of weight.
No idea why it says Jody Bilger. But I want to say a couple of things about John. First of all, perhaps a little known fact, John was the best man at my wedding and gave a wonderful speech that we still talk about today. Most of it true, some of it true.
It was pretty scathing, George.
Yeah,
I roasted you.
So I want to say a couple of things. I came to John Carroll in 1991, and the person assigned to kind of take care of me during the interview was John. And one of the reasons I came to John Carroll was because of John McBratney. I don't know if you remember this, John, but you had to drive me all over town, showing me the sites, West Side Market, Severance Hall. You took me to the Co-op Market. Remember that?
Yeah, it's become your favorite shopping spot, right?
It really did. But John was so gracious, and so
we went to the art museum. I remember that.
The art museum, and we also went to the. I mean, actually, this is typical of John. He combined sightseeing with scholarly business. We went to the library at Case Western. You had to check out something. We looked at this primitive device called a CD-ROM. I don't know if you remember that.
Oh, I do, yes.
It was really a memorable weekend in Cleveland because of John back in 1991. And I came back, I was teaching in Denver at that time, and I said, if this guy is any indication of the quality of that faculty, that's the school I'm going to. So that was a remarkable weekend, and thank you so much. And I also want to say one other thing about John. You know, John is a remarkable scholar and a brilliant mind. And that is how he is known on the campus and professionally. But I happen to know, and this is quite true, John is an extraordinary poet, and he's rather quiet about this. But John and I have this institution called the Power Breakfast. And sometimes the Power Breakfast happens in Burton, and sometimes it happens in First Watch in Cleveland. But we've been doing this for many years. We exchange poems. And I meet John at my strength as a poet. I'm a negligible scholar. And I bring some of my poems, John brings some of his poems. And I mean, John could certainly have made his career as a poet. He's a poet of remarkable fluency and sensitivity and intelligence. And I just sort of want to add that to the McBratney legend, that John has been very quiet and modest about this. But if you can pry some of his poems away from him, you'll see that this is someone who is an extraordinary writer across the board. And my final comment is, throughout John's career, I have read his essays, his scholarly essays. And at the time when scholarship was most inarticulate, the time of deconstruction and so forth, when I couldn't read it, John's beautifully constructed, sinewy, eloquent prose always beguiled me and always became a kind of model to me in my own writing. And so I thank you for that, John, for maintaining the very highest standards of scholarship and poetry throughout the time I've known you. I've learned so much from you, good friend.
Thank you very much, George. That's a lovely tribute. And I just want to say that I've learned so much from you as a poet. Sometimes I think I'm imitating you too much. And I have to say too, Phil, your poetry is wonderful too. We've never had a power breakfast together, but you know, maybe in my retirement I'll be able to pry you away from all your duties and we can have a power breakfast. But you know, we have two terrific poets in our department, and I mean to show you how good they are, they helped to mold the man who became the first poet laureate of Ohio, and that is Dave Lucas, who was kind enough to introduce me. So I mean, you guys have done a bang up job too, and I hope I'm around when you folks retire so that I can return the favor and speak as glowingly about you as you have about me.
Thanks, John.
Yeah.
Thanks, George. So I just want to thank everybody again for coming and celebrating John's career with us together. It's really important to have a ritual of this kind of, I don't know, love fest, because, you know, we're often very solitary in our individual labors at our institution. You know, we're in the classroom alone with our students, and yet we rely on each other to be doing that work to help each student as they move through their process of, you know, coming into their own and coming into their powers and skills and life. And so I'm just grateful that we were able to sort of walk along with you while not being in those same rooms together. So, and anybody else, please feel free to say hello to John right now. If you have to go, that's okay. It's great to see your faces and see your names. I hope you're all doing well. Stay in touch. And yeah, so if anybody wants to jump in, please go for it.
Phil, thank you for organizing all this. Phil does 100 things to the one thing that I do. He's got his fingers in so many pies, not just at the university, but elsewhere. And yet he manages to find time to organize this last lecture series. And he's going to say it, no, doesn't take, that long to do, but I'm continually amazed by his ability to just get things done in so many different areas. It's really
I do have to say that the methamphetamine tends to help.
I knew that we would one day get that secret out.
John, I just wanted to really, really thank you for being such a great mentor and friend to me. I will never forget calling you from Honduras, working with some really horrible bureaucrats down there, and I was like, man, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing over here. And you were just like, well, like Macbeth would say, it takes the same time to go forward as to go backward. And it just gave me that Macbeth quote.
That's right. Yes, right. As tedious as to go o'er. Yeah.
Well, yes. And so thank you for that all through the years.
Yeah.
I really admired your love for the humanities.
Yeah. Well,
Thank you.
I love hearing about all the things that you're doing, Danny. Amazing work. Not only in community development and social justice, but also in literature. Danny's a student who could have gone for a Ph.D. in English if he'd just taken another direction. He knows more about T.S. Eliot than I do, and he can certainly quote more T.S. Eliot than I can.
Well, I'd like to say something. This is Katie. And I was lucky enough to.
Oh, Katie. Hi, Katie.
Hi. I'm sorry. I'm just kind of enjoying this on my couch. So I was lucky enough to work with you just for a couple of years towards the end of your career. And I remember you really helped me with teaching linked courses. And I remember the advice you gave me about teaching Mrs. Dalloway, which I was scheduled to teach over 3 periods. And you said that's never going to work. And you were right. It didn't work. So I ended up I took your syllabus and I copied like the way you did your assignments, and I just took all the advice I could get from you, and it was all really good advice.
Well, I'm glad I could help, and thank you for introducing me to Leila Gandhi.
Oh, right. Yes.
Yeah. Really interesting post-colonial critic who writes in that abstruse way that I was talking about, but at the same time writes very engagingly. She's one of the few who can pull that off.
Yes, and also thank you for allowing me or inviting me to join in the Learner Lecture Series, the Humanities program. And if you have a moment, I'd like to hear what you're reading now and what you plan to read. Like what's on the plate?
Well, I'm about to review a new book for Victorian Studies, and it's on British spy fiction, spy and invasion fiction in the latter part of the 19th century, the beginning of the 20th century. So I have to, but I'm looking forward to reading all of this fiction that I've never, like 39 Steps. I've never read that, or Green Mantle, or On the Beach. All these books I've heard about, but what if I got on my, actually, a lot of what I've done recently is read for address. I had to give an address to the Kipling Society, so I read about 20 books of criticism on Kipling. It was actually kind of interesting. I'm reading Stevenson, the Scottish writer, and I'm reading a novella that I'd never heard of before until I just picked off of my bookshelf his collected works, his collected fiction, and it's called Otto, and it takes place in Central Europe, and it's just so unlike Stevenson. It just doesn't sound like Stevenson, but it's really interesting to read this writer after reading, Treasure Island and, The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So I've got about, sort of a half dozen books on my, probably more than that, maybe 10 books on my bedside table. And, then I subscribe to all these, the New York Review of Books, the London Review of Books, the New Yorker, Harper's. So I'm constantly shifting back and forth among stuff just before I pop off to sleep.
Awesome.
So John, what is the origin of this nickname, Jump?
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, my sister would have to out me. I was born in January, and in the springtime, I was getting pretty active in my bassinet, and my mother called me Johnny Jump Up after the pansy, after the flower. So I was Johnny Jump Up, and then that was shortened to Jumper, or as one of my friends like to call me, Leaper, and then shortened even further to Jump. And it's a sort of a bone of contention in my family. Some of my sisters think that it's too undignified that I still am known in my family by Jump. And then others are, very comfortable calling me by the old name. And I just sort of let them do what they wish.
I really wish we had known this nickname earlier, because you would have been Dr. Jump all the time.
Steve Hayward knew about it. He went to the Geauga County Fair with us. And I think my children, my children are always trying to undermine me. It's really terrible. I raised them poorly. One of my kids, I think, told Steve Hayward that my nickname was Jumper, and Steve could not let that go. At every opportunity, he would, get that in, sneak that in. So I'm surprised that more people didn't pick up on it. But Peggy says, my sister, talk to me. I have a lot more inside information. My sisters and my brother are all great revealers of, salacious and indecent stories about people near and dear. And you just don't want them to have any alcohol, or they might, in vino veritas, as my Latin teacher would say.
So John, any last words for our students and alums who are proceeding through their
Well, I have to confess that when I was, reading over my presentation, I got a little choked up at times, and and this is another thing you probably don't know about me, but I choke up easily. Betsy can vouch for this, that if we're watching a movie, who's the one who first starts to tear up? Right here. Anyway, I told myself I am not going to lose it as I address, all of you who've been so wonderful with me and to me over the years. And I will certainly miss you all, miss my students who keep me young. You age and they don't age. They just stay the same age. And it's really kind of miraculous. I don't know what they eat or drink, but they just never age, it seems. And I sometimes fall into the kind of delusion that I'm not aging either, because I'm spending lots of time with them. They keep, my students keep my mind fresh. They really do. And current, if I want to know whether the word player is still a term that you can use today with any they will tell me, oh no, that's passe. You can't use that term anymore. And I will dearly miss my colleagues too, but I will be back, like Johnny. I'm back in The Shining. So yeah, I will be back to teach occasionally, and I will keep teaching. I hope to teach not just at the college level, but also languages, teach English to refugees and immigrants if I can get into that world. I'd like to try my hand at that. But I also want time to write. I think it's one of the big reasons that I'm retiring, is I really want to write a lot more than I've been able to do. Not that I begrudge not having the time. I thoroughly enjoy teaching, but I really love writing too, and so that'll be good. So bon voyage and au revoir, but we'll stay in touch. I know we'll have other occasions in which to chat and to mingle once our masks are off and the virus is subsided a bit. I hope that we'll have an opportunity to meet face to face.
Thank you so much, John. We appreciate you so much, and
thank you all.
You'll always be with us. Jump. All right, great to see everybody. I'm going to hang out, and if anybody wants to hang out further, they can.
Yeah, and I'm happy to hang out. I need to call my son at 9 o'clock. He's departing for Bahrain tomorrow, so I want to make sure that I catch him before he goes.
All right. Well,
yeah,
I'm sure that's plenty of time. So
yeah, we got plenty of time.
Good to see everybody.
Thank you again, Phil.
Yeah.
John.
Yes, Eric.
Yeah. You remember years ago, I was asking you for letters of recommendation and things, and you kept asking me about my Oscar Wilde paper. If you remember my Oscar Wilde paper.
I do remember your Oscar Wilde.
Yeah, you will not believe this. Probably about half a year ago, I found a hard drive in a storage bin in my storage closet. And I thought, well, this thing's probably broken or busted or junk or whatever. So I plugged it in. I found the Oscar Wilde paper. So if you really want it, I can send you that Oscar Wilde paper. I found it, and it exists. And it's, I just thought it was so funny. It reminded me of you instantly. I said, oh, he was looking for this for years for me. And I finally found it after all that time. It was really fun to find it.
I would love to see it, but just expect that I'm going to send it back to you with a barrage of comments.
Well, I think the last time you left comments on them, I kind of I graduated, so you know what happens then. So they get put in a box somewhere, and that's where it stays.
Yeah, I had a professor in graduate school who was like that. He said, did I give you back your paper? And I said, no. He said, well, I have to dive back into the pile. So we all have our piles.
I have piles and piles. We're on spring break, and boy, do I have piles.
Yeah, yes.
I'd like to take this moment to say that John's colleagues, each and every one of you, is special to me. Just John has shared so much.
I only say good things.
Right, only good. And he's filled my heart with stories, with your stories as well as his stories. And the students that he's shared so many stories, and they are just, they fill my heart, and I'm so thankful. You're all wonderful.
Yeah, again, I just say wonderful things about, and I suppress all the terrible things that I also know about you.
All right, I'll talk now. Hi, Dr. McBratney.
Hello, Dimitri.
How are you?
Well, thanks. How is the Greek club?
Oh, so much fun. But I'm gonna go here in a second because I have a discussion question for Dickens here in a moment that I need to finish. But I just want to tell a quick anecdote. I threw it in the chat a bit ago, but I want to talk about it. The first time that I met you was the advising cohort freshman year. How they throw everybody into the little groups and they're like, hey, you guys might be English majors, so hang out with other English majors so you know people. And it had been a long couple days. getting used to the college environment was really weird, especially when you had professors come up to you and say, just call me by my first name. Just call me whatever. And so I, being the nervous person, not wanting to get anything wrong, asked, hi, how should I address you? And you said, oh, I don't know, I guess Mr. McBratney would be fine. And so for the next 3 years, I called you Mr. McBratney in every conversation. And it took me until junior year to actually call you Dr. McBratney. So that's just really fun. And I'm so happy that I've been able to take 2 classes with you. And you're just a fantastic professor. I can't really quantify it into words.
Dimitri, yeah. And, call me whatever you want to call me. That's fine. Yeah.
I heard Jump is available. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm reminded of another professor from my past, Dr. Clancy, who left at 17.
It says Will, but weren't you Bill at one point?
I rebranded, yes.
Are you still in theater?
No, I'm in publishing now in Nashville, of all places. But I think back to all of our friends and family who are no longer with us. And I remember one of Dr. Clancy's lines saying that you can't get into heaven without your Norton anthology. And
wow.
The whole stack of them are right here in front of me in my office in Nashville. And Karen knows I still have my Romanticism texts. Mary Claire, I've got my Milton text. We're all hanging solid here, but thank you so much for everything that you did for all of us. I was privileged to have you so many times between undergraduate and grad school. And while I'm no longer teaching, it's the lessons that we take away from you last forever. So thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.
So now I'm wishing I could have taken courses from all of my old colleagues. I mean, I've often thought that in the past, but seeing everybody gathered, oh, I'm getting all verklempt. It's so wonderful to see everybody together.
Yeah.
And John, I think you escorted me around on my first visit too. And I remember visiting the bookstore with you, which was not a particularly memorable. I had this sort of sense memory of walking by, in fact, probably shelves of Norton anthologies, or maybe it was a library shelf, and sort of snippets. You didn't drive me all over town. I remember not long after I arrived, George led an expedition to visit the ore loaders with Duncan Wu. Were you along on that?
Yes. Trip? Yeah, that was an amazing trip.
We trespassed on the iron ore and tromped over to see the machinery.
They've been taken away.
Yes,
but
yeah, they were
bringing them back.
They were threatened at the time, but the fence saying "Do not enter" did not stop George from driving right onto the piles of ore in the giant boatmobile. It was definitely an introduction to Cleveland.
Yeah, that was Whiskey Island, wasn't it, or near Whiskey Island?
Whiskey Island.
Yeah, yeah. Risking it all on Whiskey Island.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I remember driving you around, and I remember talking about, you were describing your experience in Canada and saying, I think it's time to come back to the US. And
Yep. And I still feel the same way. I mean, there have been many times when I thought, and I absolutely adore Toronto, but I'm glad not to be on the other side of a border. And I've particularly felt that this year because I have so many friends who've been part of separated families who've been stranded on opposite sides of borders. Mm-hmm. So there are times when it's good to be back, but that was the move to Cleveland was a very happy one.
Are you still in DC?
I am in DC and I am never moving again.
Yeah.
Never. I'm sitting, I have you can't quite see all of it, but I have a massive set of bookcases behind me and I can't stand the thought of unloading those bookcases. So I'm never moving again.
Yeah.
I'm happy to have a large home reference library. So I can operate from home and teaching occasionally at the University of Maryland and at Catholic, and mainly working in historic preservation and acquiring dogs. There's BB.
Yeah. Yeah, we just acquired a cat, so we're parents again.
Excellent.
But it's
John,
great.
I know it may be against the categorical imperative, but I believe you can rename the cat a name that's that you enjoy. If Giuseppe seems off.
I like Giuseppe. I'm studying Italian. I love that language. I just love the sound of it. So it's, yeah, and it comes very naturally to my lips. So I'm happy to just, and he recognizes the name too, especially when we say it sharply. Are you gonna, oh, Betsy's gonna go get Giuseppe. Get a chance to look at him.
Show cat, as they say in the Zoom era, right?
So yeah, show cat. Yeah, usually the cat just processes in front of the camera. That's usually bringing a smile to everyone's lip. I mean, there are certain advantages to Zoom.
A friend of mine just got herself a clear sort of. I think it's supposed to hold a monitor, but it's made of plexiglass that sits over her keyboard so that her cat can sit on top of the plexiglass thing.
Oh,
and
wow.
she can still type under it and see her monitor over it.
Yeah. I'm always having to blow cat hair off my keyboard.
Oops, it's kind
Yep.
Yeah, Giuseppe. Hi, Giuseppe. Whoops. So,
It's not up
he's
for
exploring.
this.
Well, anyway, here's areas, Giuseppe. I'm going to put him down because
Absolutely.
he's very independent. He's probably gotten into 3 cupboards already. He goes through more groceries than we do.
Bye and bow out, everybody, but I'm so glad to be here. Thank you, John, for everything over the years and for the talk tonight. See everybody soon.
Good to see you, Karen.
If you're doing those on Facebook all the time, I'm looking at you, Mary Claire, send me an email.
Oh, definitely. Send me your, do you have the same email address?
Yep.
Okay.
But I'll email you.
Me.
We can be in touch.
Email me. Thanks, Karen. Nice to see
Okay.
you.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Good night, Karen.
Good night, Karen. John, I should say that that must have been, you know, with the way you spent most of the early 1990s, because I too was the gracious recipient of your kindness when I was interviewing here for the job in January of 1991. I was really appreciative and again thought, this must be the place.
Yeah.
This must be the place. So thank you again for everything you've done for all of us over the decades.
Yeah, we've been to quite a few MLAs together.
We have.
Yeah.
We have indeed.
2 searches in a row, didn't we?
Yeah, many 5 a.m. in the
Boston
airport.
and in Seattle. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. I couldn't have imagined a finer colleague and a finer scholar, and just a role model. Thank you.
Thanks.
Cheers, John.
Oh, thank you, Colette. And Debbie very kindly arranged to have sent to our house this afternoon a big box from Pistones, or Pistones, as they say, with a lovely bottle of wine and a huge carrot cake, which, you know, I'll probably devour half of it tonight.
That was on behalf of the whole department, just a
Yeah,
token of our.
I realize, but you were the organizing principle behind it, I think. Yeah. But yes, I'm thanking the whole department for sending that gift. Yes.
Did you drink the wine in anything particular?
We did have a little bit, and we're going to have more later. But I also have work to do and miles to go before I sleep.
I put in the chat you're maybe one of two colleagues who would confess to pulling all-nighters to do your grading and preparing for class. That, to me, just signals a kind of special endurance and persistence and commitment. So I am a sleep wimp. I would never, ever do that. So you and probably maybe Debbie also, who have this massive energy, thank you for giving so much of yourself. So
I love hearing those birds in the morning. You know, at 4 o'clock in the morning, they start chirping. I know that I'm almost there until breakfast. So, yeah, it's actually one of the reasons why I think I need to retire, I need to save myself from myself. I'm just too conscientious. So, yeah, I really should start thinking about my health occasionally.
John, I'm gonna jump in as well. You know, I also have an interview story.
Yeah, San Diego, was it? No, it wasn't San Diego. We were in San Diego together, weren't we?
We were. It was DC when I interviewed.
Well, it was DC. That's where. But didn't you go with us to San Diego also?
I think so. Yeah, I think that was that the. I can't remember exactly, but I know that there were a couple of years. But actually, when I interviewed, it was you, Karen, and Jean Collard were actually who interviewed me. So, you know, so I would say the same. I mean, it was my first impression of John Carroll was you, you know, and so and you brought me here. So, but you know, I also had the advantage of being next to you. I don't know how many years, you know, in the office, and I really miss this year, well, last year and this year not being next to you, you know, in the apartment, and because I'm stuck, you know, I'm stuck at home or I'm remote. So, but maybe I will.
Heard all those times I swore.
All those times, yeah, I know. I could not believe the things that I was hearing, you know, through the walls, and so. But no, I mean, what you know, really, honestly, I learned so much just from, you know, my door was open, your door was open, and just these, like, you know, these student after student coming in and you mentoring them, you know, talking them through papers and ideas, and just the time that you take with students. I mean, it's inspiring. It always was. And so it is, I mean, you really, you know, have been a mentor to me, and I thank you for all of the, you know, the years of just, I mean, like I say, really inspiring me. And so it's been wonderful. And also, I mean, I had, you know, the chance to go to Blossom with you and Betsy, and, you know, and concerts with Brigitte before. You know, it's you know, lots of great memories. And we'll miss you, but, you know, you're not going to get rid of us that easily.
No, I can be enticed back occasionally. Yeah.
And so, and I actually, and Rose told me earlier tonight, she said, "Give my best to Dr. McBratney." So, and she still has. I mean,
grown up.
What?
She's not in high school yet, is she?
No, she's in 5th grade, but, you know, growing fast.
Well, so. She sounds like a high school student. I mean, she's very mature for her age.
So,
wow.
But she's still. I was going to say, she still has this. You and Betsy gave. It was actually a Blossom concert. You know, of this little pig that all the girls had been playing with, and finally, its oinker finally gave out this winter. Eliza was pushing it, and nothing was coming out. I said, "Oh, you know, fine." So, but anyway, so you've been really generous to all of us, and I really.
Thank you. I always feel a little. I guess I'm sort of a little bit taken aback when I hear that I've been a mentor to someone, because I never think that I'm a mentor. I always think that I'm an equal. You know, I'm just we're all peers. So, but perhaps just the virtue of being older, you know, gives you that title. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to step in. I've been
on leave. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and great to see your face. Yeah.
I wouldn't miss this opportunity to hear your reflections on your career and the trajectory. And I just want to say, it was eight, I think, years ago when you and Mary Claire interviewed me at MLA, maybe 9 now. And as the others have said, I have to say, you were just from the first times I spoke to you on the phone to meeting you in person, you were such a warm-hearted, collegial person. I knew that if you were anything like what John Carroll was, that this could be a place that I could call home, because you just had this aura to you. And then I remember coming for campus visit, and I believe it was snowy and cold, and you were sort of my ideal of the kind of person who demonstrates sprezzatura, because you had your hat and you had your like galoshes and you were like ready for anything. And in fact, I think I stepped out and it was, I don't know, raining or snowing, and you were like, you even had a spare hat for me.
No, I gave you my hat because I had a hood.
Okay, there you go. You remember.
Yeah.
And I also, yeah, and
yeah, Mary Claire and I interviewed you at the MLA in Boston.
Yes, that's right, in Boston. And before that, I remember that period. I was working away at the library all the time. I was escaping my little children, and so when you were trying to contact me, you were speaking to my kids. And that was the first test, that you passed, that you could actually speak to these little people in the world. Although I always found it very funny because you said, I spoke to your daughter today. And I was like, you actually spoke to my son. But that went down in your memory as my daughter. But yeah, so I just want to say, I said it in the chat, but I spent many weeks or many days walking down the corridor from my office to your office when you were chair, and sitting in a spot in your office, which was inevitably covered by 100 stacks of paper. And I always marveled at all these stacks, but you seem to know where everything was. And just really being the recipient of your counsel, your advice, your friendship, really just everything. So I will be very sad, to not have your presence in the department, but I'm sure you will be back in some capacity, which very happy about.
Yeah, I will, and I'll be in touch with colleagues too, I'm sure. But thank you, Jean.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's great to see you back.
Thank you. It's
you're at home now, right?
Yep, back at home, and mostly well. I'm just I have a few pieces of collateral damage, but it's they may just be for the long term things that I need to just deal with, but they're minor, so feel last month I spent sort of feeling euphoric to be alive, just
sure,
when you face something like that. But yeah, so by next month or even the end of this month, I'll be just kind of, it'll be a distant memory that it ever happened.
Yeah.
So
good.
Hi, John. I just
Hi, Katrina. How are you?
Good. How are you?
What are you up to?
I'm teaching English as an adjunct at a community college, and I'm living at home because of COVID right now.
Sure.
So yeah, I wish I was up in Cleveland doing something big and fun, but I just wanted to thank you, like everyone else. One of my favorite grad classes was your Cosmopolitanism in Victorian literature last fall. Yeah, it's been a while, but it was just like, I remember just so many classes, we were like shouting at each other, like all the students, because we were so, and just like memories of you bringing in your heater from your office, and like, of course, like all the food and everything, but I would have never, all the grad classes have, been great at John Carroll, but I just have the fond memories of all of us like standing up almost and like, just shouting at the other person across the table over the way we live now, or like Villette, and you just were always like, feeding the fire in a good way and like writing on the board, and we were just like, it was just an awesome experience. And as many people have already said, you've really inspired my passion for Victorian literature, you know, in an area that I never thought I would be interested in, but I really enjoyed writing those papers, even though you really challenged me and you really challenged all of us. So I just want to thank you for every single mark on my paper, because it challenged me, and your honesty, but also just your enthusiasm and the way that we were just able to have so much, you know, scholarly fun, but also just like pure joy and fun in the classroom, because it was great. So thank you.
Yeah, well, there's a special, I mean, I love teaching all my classes, but it's great teaching graduate students because they're closer to you in their commitment to the pursuit of literary studies. And yeah, I was very happy to just play referee to this scrimmage that was going on in the classroom, and happy to instigate as long as that would lead to further skirmishes among students. Always civil, of course. We insisted on that.
Right, in a good way. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Adriana.
Hello, John. I just wanted to say hello.
Oh yeah, Mustafa. Hi.
How are you? Hello,
Great to
Debbie.
see you. Yeah.
Good to see you all, and thank you for all your help. And I was lucky, as Peter said, I was lucky to be in your next office, like
yes,
hearing you sometimes, and on the other side, George, Dr. Bill Gare, and I was lucky to be between you and George. I think that's a great luck, and thank you so much for all your help. And
yeah.
I think
We still have to go to Holden Arboretum.
that's what I'm gonna say now. Like, I think we still have one activity to do.
Yeah.
Like
I extended that invitation, in theory, but it's never come to practice yet. So we really need to do it. And perhaps this year, if Governor DeWine allows us to go.
Mm-hmm. That would be great. I'd love to. Yes.
Yeah. I hope your family's doing well.
Yeah, they're all doing well. Kids are good.
Good.
Thank you.
Hi, Professor.
Leanne, how are you?
Yeah, it's very glad to see you here. Yeah, I very miss your class.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. I still want to say
congratulations on everything. Your marriage and expecting too. I hope I'm not giving away too much information, but
yeah, I'm not a real student, but I should say you're the best teacher I did so far. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you. Yeah.
You impressed me a lot.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you hung in there in all the discussions. Your ability to read very difficult literature was just remarkable to me. So it was, it warmed my heart that you were as committed as you were to learning English and studying literature of many different kinds, world literature, romantic literature. I'm trying to think, you were also in that course in which we studied the sort of fin de siècle at the end of the 19th century, the Gothic. Yeah, so we were in, what, 4 courses together, I think?
Yes, 4 courses. Yeah.
Take care, Peter. Yeah. Has to attend to his young girls.
Hi, Paige. How are you?
Hey, Paige.
Good. I was actually just going to pop in. Dr. McBratney, I have to make a confession finally. That when I took my first class with you, which was Victorian Lit my junior year, I was very intimidated. And I was actually a little frustrated because I was a little spoiled at that point as an English major with just getting good grades. But you really challenged me in the first couple weeks of that class. I forget some like reader response paper, and you gave me so much constructive feedback, but I just was kind of like, oh, I don't know if I can take this class, I'm gonna drop it. And of course I didn't. And that ended up being one of my favorite classes I ever took. And I know that I produced all of my best work in your courses at John Carroll. And actually I wrote in that class with you my Dracula paper, which you helped me edit into graduate school. And now in my final semester, I'm actually writing a final paper here on Dracula as well.
Wow.
Nice for me to sort of have that.
What's your thesis on?
It's actually, so it's a literature research course. So it's looking at differences in the publishing of Dracula. So not about the text itself.
Okay.
Differences between the abridged version and the original version and all that good stuff, and cultural significance of those things. So
yeah, neat.
It's still percolating. I haven't written my first draft yet. We're actually starting to work on abstracts and everything next week, but I'm excited to sort of return to Victorian lit, which I haven't been able to really touch on here, but certainly my favorite type of literature that was fostered in your class. So I was so for that with you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it was a pleasure having you in class. We had some. You were always someone I could depend on in class discussion. You always had something very thoughtful to say, and your papers were terrific.
Thank you.
Well, should we call it an evening?
Yeah, I think it's in about 10 minutes. I need to call Kumar.
I think it's time to dive into that carrot cake, John. Good to see you, and I hope to see you around the department.
Yeah, I'm sad that I can't share the carrot cake with others in the department, you know.
Very unfair.
We'll just have to get another one.
You're not sad.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Phil and Debbie and everyone.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, well, thanks to Phil. Thanks so much for doing this.
Really was the spearheader there. Yeah. Bringing us all together. So to honor John.
My wife thought I was an introvert, but I think I have some secret extroversion, which has emerged during the pandemic, which is to say I crave more connection. And so this helps satisfy that a little bit.
Yeah.
Good to see you all. So be well, stay healthy, and we'll see you around.